Hello and welcome to the Stations of the Cross and our reflections. And we're going to think on stations 5 and 6. Simon of Cyrene helps Jesus carry the cross. Luke 23, verse 26. As they led him away, they seized Simon from Cyrene, who was on his way from the country, and put the cross on him and made him carry it behind Jesus. Jesus said, "Take up your cross and follow me." Simon hadn't heard these words that Jesus had said a couple of years before. All he had come for was to experience the Passover in Jerusalem. The city had been full, almost to bursting. He'd camped outside. He'd arrived outside from North Africa, from Cyrene, and had had to camp outside the city. That morning, he would have heard the crowds. He knew about the Romans, of course, and about their torturous methods of execution. Maybe he'd even witnessed some, but he never imagined he'd be taking part in one. All he was doing was standing there, minding his own business, when a soldier saw him. "You!" He heard the shout, but hoped it was to someone else. No, they were looking at him. "You!" they called again, and a soldier came and dragged him over. Simon is not a bad man. He'd have run if he could. But he looks at the man on his knees before him, with the crossbar on his back. He can barely make out the man's face, it's so bruised and battered. His back is just a mash of flesh and blood. The man manages to lift his head for a look at Simon. Those brown eyes looking at him pleadingly for relief. And yet, he's not begging. He's frightened, but in a way resigned. Is that the word? No, it's as if he's accepted his fate. But there's no anger, no hate, despite what they've done to him. No, it's, what is it? It's love. He's looking at Simon with love. It's almost as if he cares more about Simon's fate than he cares about his own. Simon is shocked. In those few moments, his world is turned upside down. He carefully lifts the heavy beam from Jesus' back, trying not to cause more pain, and gladly takes it. All the while, as he walks behind the staggering Jesus, all the way to the place they called Skull Hill, he asks himself, who is this man? The women around him are crying, men are beside themselves, hitting themselves on their chests. Simon carries on, up the hill, slowly. He lays his small burden down, but is determined to find out more. Before they crucify him, Jesus looks at Simon for one last time. Gratitude, love, compassion, and fear, all displayed in that one last look. "I will stay," Simon whispers, and hopes that Jesus hears. So we're going to listen to Psalm 86, "To My Humble Supplication," by Benjamin Britten.
Preserve my soul, for I am whole. O thou my God, save thy servant that trusteth in thee. Be merciful unto me, O Lord, for I cry unto thee daily. Rejoice the soul of thy servant, for unto thee, O Lord, do I lift up my soul.
This is station 6. Veronica wipes the face of Jesus. Genesis chapter 1, starting at verse 26. Then God said, "Let us make humankind in our image, according to our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the wild animals of the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps upon the earth." So God created humankind in God's image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. The story of Veronica is not actually in the Bible. Veronica receives her name from the Greek for true image. We, as individuals and corporately, carry the image of Christ within us. We are called to be Christ's hands and feet and presence, in joy and in sorrow. Christ within us might be the only Christ that our family, friends and neighbours ever meet. In Matthew 25, it says, "Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick or in prison and visited you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly I tell you, just as you did it to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me." At this particular time, we remember all those who are being good neighbours, who are showing Christ, whether they know it or not, to their family and friends and community. We remember the members of the NHS who work with such grace under such pressure. We remember all those people who nobody ever talks about, people who collect our rubbish and clean the streets, the postmen and women, the shop workers, the people who make sure that our water and our electricity and our gas are running. We remember all those who attempt to show the true face of Christ to the world, for all those engaged in mission, for all those who are called to teach the faith in successive generations. In the name of God, Creator, Redeemer, and Giver of all life. Amen. And so we hope you will join us at 8 o'clock to say evening prayer together on Zoom. We can do that live. If you send me an email, I'll send you an invitation.